All right, welcome everyone to the April 1st, 2021 Whitman Buildings, Facilities and Capital Expenditures Committee. It's 5:33 and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
United
States,
States of America,
and
to the republic
for
for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty.
with liberty
and justice
for all.
Thanks, everyone. All right. So with the school members of the school here, we'll jump right into their discussion on the Whitman-Hanson School District capital articles. So I'll leave it to whoever wants to go.
You want to take them in order as they appear on the warrant?
Whatever's easiest for you guys.
Sure.
Article 817, Duval, Conley, and Whitman Middle School phone systems. And I don't know if anyone had any questions of Steve or George on that.
So just to put this into background, just for our new member and anybody else watching, the school committee is proposing for a replacement of the phone systems at all the elementary school, at both elementaries, the middle school, and the high school. The town of Hanson has already appropriated money towards the upgrades, towards this project on their end. So they're asking for funding from our end.
For Whitman and for Whitman's share at the regional high school, that would be our percentage as well. The need, and George and Steve can jump in if I'm incorrect, the need is simply that they're old and antiquated. The system, they can't get parts for it. Not only the telephones themselves, but the whole entire infrastructure needs to be replaced. We do run our own fiber back and forth, so everything feeds back to the high school. So that's where all the brains are located. There'd be very little duplication as far as our middle school project goes when that comes to fruition, hopefully in the next couple of years, because most of the equipment can be used on a secondary nature. I believe I'm correct with the way I'm saying that, Steve?
That's correct, exactly, yes. We did an IT needs assessment when the new superintendent, assistant superintendent, then Jeff and George took over. They reached out to custom computer specialists, and they did an IT needs assessment to determine what they inherited from the previous administration to do due diligence, and the phone system was one of the priority items that was identified. We then reached out to Carousel Industries, another vendor on the state bid list who used to do our phone system support, and they did a in-depth review of what we had currently. They contacted Avaya, the manufacturer, and went through all of our sold tos, all of basically anything that we purchased through them, no matter which reseller we went through. They keep a master list, and then they crunch the numbers for us. And that is what we originally went with last year. Hanson went by those numbers. Whitman, we were unable to get you the information in time, so we tabled the project. This fall, we were going to represent it, so I engaged another vendor, custom computer specialist, that did the IT needs assessment to get a second opinion on what Carousel came back with, and they recrunched the numbers. They sent engineers on site, they checked all of our closets, did a thorough review, and they came back with their own findings. Their numbers seemed to match what Carousel was. They were slightly a little higher. That can be attributed to differences in labor costs. They might have a different hourly rates. They might be able to do the job quicker, or they had slightly different cost list price differences. The big thing that I wanted to say is these prices aren't binding. These are just estimates for budgetary purposes. Since this exceeds $50,000, we do have to do an invitation for bid. Then that's when everyone will give us the actual prices. So we're trying to fund it first, then go out, see what we'll get for money, and obviously we're hoping it comes in less than it should. In discussing the projects with Josh McNeil from the town side, we've been sending him all the quotes. He's been reviewing everything, and we have two main solutions that we are by Avaya, which is our current provider. One of them was Aura solution, which is what the two vendors originally went with based on their assessment, and Josh had reached out and said, had we considered IP Office? That's a solution that the towns currently use. We had not. We went by the recommendation from the vendors based on the information they gathered. I did reach out to integration partners as well as Carousel and custom computer specialists just to do our due diligence and get the information on IP Office. However, we didn't have enough time to thoroughly crunch it. So I'm still presenting the information that we originally had from the original findings from last year and this fall. I'm getting conflicting information. While Integration Partners says the price will be cheaper by a significant amount, it's like a third difference. Carousel came back and said it would actually be an increase to $381,000 for the total project cost. So I have one vendor saying it's cheaper, one vendor saying it's more, and this isn't what we had originally discussed with the school committee. When we had the custom computer come out and give their findings, we were going with that original Aura solution, not IP Office. I know I sent a lot of information and I kind of went off there. I don't know if any of the members have any questions for me or if I can elaborate on anything.
When you gave the revised amount, the $381,000, that was for the entire project or Whitman's share of the project, how much of a difference was that? And can you articulate exactly what portion of the project that's for?
Between Carousel and this year.
Exactly, yeah. So Carousel, the total project cost for both towns was $342,194. So $342,194.80 was their estimate. And then when I just reached out to Carousel again for the IP Office solution, they came back with $381,000 for the total project cost for IP Office. I don't understand the numbers. Josh and I reviewed them. We think that they may be inflated because IP Office is usually a small business solution. It's meant for smaller organizations, whereas Aura is the enterprise solution. And we're clearly, enterprise clearly commands more of a cost because they're meant for larger organizations. The fact that it's coming in more expensive, I'd need to have a meeting with Molly, our account representative at Carousel, to find out what drives these numbers. She broke it out by school. She did give us some equipment, but I haven't had a chance to actually talk with her. I didn't receive that until 11:43 this morning, and I shared it with Josh when I received it.
I guess from the school department standpoint was we went with what we felt was best based on the companies that we've been using for years, based on our existing system. We did it 1 year with one company, we did it another year with another company as part of a larger needs assessment. We are at the stage now where we went to our facility subcommittee, it got approved, we went to our school committee, it got approved, and now we present it to you folks. You know, the bottom line is that we're here to discuss it, we're here to talk about it, and with Hanson already going into its second year of having the money aside, depending on what happens here, we will then look to see what we can do for Hanson schools only, because I get a little nervous leaving money that's already been approved going into possibly a full second year into the third year if not being used. So that's what we present tonight.
Are we confident in these numbers as we've received them as being a worst case scenario?
That is correct.
Yeah, that's the high.
Yep.
So
And
if
George,
anything, it's less money.
just to echo what you were saying, Josh McNeil had agreed, had been keeping us up to date with his communications with the school department technology. And Josh, I don't want to misrepresent what you said in the past, but tell me if I'm correct. Basically, it came down to is this is almost an imminent need. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the system's definitely old, antiquated, and, they're at risk of obviously, having a major meltdown, if you will, if they do have a problem and there's no support behind it. They're really in a position where it's going to cost a lot more money to replace the system. I think we were just trying to figure out, from all different perspectives, what the best solution would be for them to, move forward with replacement. Since we have the IP office, I mean, I think I mentioned this in the beginning that, we're connected basically from the fiber standpoint, but disconnected. We're not, we just got to plug in, if you will, to connect the towns and the schools. And, we shouldn't really be dialing 10 digits to get to the schools. It should really be, a 4-digit or a 3-digit dial to be able to get to, another department, if you will, within the town. So, making sure that we have compatibility or interoperability between the towns and the schools is, I think, of utmost important at this point too, as well, to make sure that we're not going to obviously get into something that we really can't connect together. So.
If I could interrupt, we used to be connected. Yes, we had a relationship where, as you well know, Josh, that the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District provided the tech support for both Whitman and Hanson. That is no longer the case. And we do not support Hanson, we do not support Whitman, although there are infrastructure pieces that is still in place. I would ask Lincoln that if he wants to entertain that, where we go back to a situation like that, then I would be in support of us taking it over again, and then we can see where that leads. But as of right now, we are separate entities, and yes, while we need to work together, we are still separate.
Yeah, no, I'm referring to the actual phone system itself. I wasn't referring to support. I mean, just because we, don't support, the schools don't support the towns as far as technology doesn't mean that we can't connect together to establish that, phone system connection to allow us to interdial between the buildings. Sure,
I don't disagree. And I think that anything that can be done like that, that benefits both the school and the town, and it's a mutual benefit, would be best. I think that what we've presented is based on research, based on what the needs are of our district. And if the placeholder is there, it still has to go out to bid. And we all know the bid system is basically with zero-based funding. We send you the receipts basically, and then we hold it in capital, and then it gets filled once the project is completed. So it's not like it's something where the money's given and then we have to see if it comes back. So my ask for this second year is that we move forward with it, we put it on the warrant, we see what takes place at town meeting, so then we as a school district can decide if we have to do anything on the Hanson side so that we don't lose that money, or it's spent in the fashion that was approved by them, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I think we had mentioned basically in past meetings, I want to say the last few meetings, talking about a not to exceed number. To make this, to move this forward, if you will, and to get it obviously on the warrant. But I'm certainly, open to what other members want to comment on or provide feedback on too.
If I could just, my understanding is the system's gonna break. It's only a question of when. Okay, is it gonna hemorrhage after we replace it and we just never know about it? Or is it going to happen before we replace it, and then we've got a gun to our head because we have no phones in the classrooms, no phones at the offices, parents can't get in touch, and we've got a real major problem. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's being pushed so hard this year, to go forward with this and get it done. So to speak.
Yeah, no, I mean, I again, wholeheartedly agree. It definitely needs to be done. I think, Steve and I had a conversation earlier today too, as well. And, based on the information that we have at hand, I mean, looking at the Aurora solution, I believe, according to what we had talked about, requires a license for every mailbox, every voice mailbox that you set up. Whereas if you have the IP office, that doesn't require a license rather for every mailbox. So there's certainly the cost, now may be different from what moving forward as far as to, all of a sudden now, we need to add a license for every mailbox we add, and it's going to obviously cost, a bit more money moving forward. Whereas if you have the ability to add mailboxes without additional cost, I mean, obviously then you can excel as far as you need to without, the additional burden of paying for licenses,
Sure. No, and that's one of the reasons why it's great having you on here.
No, again, I'm not, like I said this in the beginning, this is something that needs to be done. There's no question as to whether or not it needs to be done. It's just a matter of, obviously the cost factor and appropriating the right resources and solution for the job. But at the end of the day, it's got to go out to bid like we've all talked about. And, frankly, it could be coming in at far less than we're even talking about now, depending on what the bid comes in at. So
yeah. We could even structure our bid to include X amount of mailboxes.
Josh, you might be the best one to answer this, but should we get this engineered first, or is this something that we can kind of self-design? I
No,
mean,
I think-
I just don't like going through a vendor to be the design, you know, discipline. I'd prefer to have an engineer kind of look at things and give us their opinion, give us a design, and then we kind of run with that, unless you don't think that's the appropriate way.
No, I mean, I think George, and Steve have gone through that. I believe Custom Computers was actually involved initially to basically evaluate the technology, if you will, not just the phone system itself. So, I mean, they did bring, and this was a paid, evaluation. It wasn't, asking a vendor for, quotes on, what we should do. It was basically, what do we have here? What's installed currently? And where do we go from here? And I think they, the two vendors that they had in two, subsequent years went ahead and said, you know what, this is what you have today, and this is what we should be looking at for tomorrow, meaning obviously, replacing the system. And, well, they can certainly, spec whatever it might be. We want to make sure it's going to be a viable solution for the district. And I don't know specifically how many extensions they have, total in general, but I mean, you obviously want to make sure the system's suitable and is going to support what they need now and into the future. I don't want to install something today that's not going to be good tomorrow, because we're going to be coming back to the same discussion here saying, geez, you know what, we installed it last year, but unfortunately we need another $300,000 or $200,000 to finish it off. That's not something we want to do.
And if I could, Don, we engage Custom Computers not as a vendor, but as the needs assessment partner that we chose. So they're on throughout the fall and culminating in a presentation to our school committee on February 10th, they did every aspect of our technology in the district. So they laid it out. I have it available if anybody would like to look at it. And then they are not they're on the state bid list. They are a vendor. However, they were contracted just to be the consultant to tell us the needs assessment that we had going on with every aspect of our technology.
Okay, I'm coming into this, I know we need a new phone system, and I've been part of these meetings all along, but this is the first time I heard that Josh, I guess, brought a new product that this consultant wasn't even brought to the table. And it could be a game changer or a money savings for a new product. I just want to make sure that what we're doing, it's a one-time purchase and it's going to carry us through to the next 20 years or 15 years, or however long voice over IP system is going to be out there supporting all the different departments and all the different schools. That's all. I think it's needed. I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing with the right product. That's all.
Quickly, Dave, can I just ask, Lincoln, what do we have for a timeline as far as deadline to get this on the warrant? I know the warrant's going to be posted, 2 weeks in advance of town meeting. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, 1 week in advance. It's on the warrant there now. It's on the draft warrant. It's ultimately up to the Board of Selectmen as to whether or not it's on the final warrant.
Mhm.
And the final warrant needs to be posted at least 1 week before town meeting. So
Dave, we're meeting again before, that deadline anyhow. And I believe Steve has set up a call, I think, with Integration Partners on Monday to further review the system. But again, at this point, I mean, do we vote on just, a number and not to exceed, or what do you want to do here? Do you want to, continue running the ground and try and, there's no question at all that we need to, they need a system, and it's just a matter of formality here and how we go about finalizing the details. Dave, you're on mute.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, essentially there's a fairly wide range of what the anticipated cost may be from.
Well, the two solutions that were presented, looking at what was presented recently from Integration Partners, I think was roughly $140,000 less, but it did not include any phones. And we were trying to figure out today whether or not the existing phones, and that's the bigger part too, is that obviously we got to make sure that, you know, the existing phones that they have, I don't think in their solution that they were being proposed from the Aurora platform, and Steve or George, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but, you know, I believe the system that was proposed allowed the use of some of the old, or a lot of the old, you know, telephones that are currently being used today to reduce the overall cost of, you know, transitioning to this new system.
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, as part of the IT needs assessment that George was talking to Don about, they reviewed more than just the phones. We also reviewed the wireless, the wired, card access, HVAC, everything across the board. So when we're talking about phone systems, everyone thinks about VoIP, voice over IP. Clearly, when you're putting in a new phone system, you want to have VoIP and you want all your end devices to be brand new. The issue that we ran into is our networking infrastructure is also a capital item that we didn't present to this committee. We presented it to the school committee as part of our 5-year capital matrix, but we didn't prioritize it this year. We wanted to make sure we were able to put something that's digestible financially. We couldn't get over $1 million approved, so we decided to just move forward with the phone system. So as part of the assessment, they did counts per closet, per school, and did basically engineering design. They reviewed how many phones go back to which IDF closet or MDF closet in each hallway. They determined how many we have per school, whether they're analog, digital, and then we have pocketed areas of VoIP here at the high school. And then they did the counts, because basically when you're designing the solution, each room has to have the analog and digital cabling terminated to a media gateway. Whether we're on the first solution or the second solution, the phones have to go back to a brain, and then that then goes over our dark fiber back to the high school, which is going to be the core of the network, and that's where all of our DID lines come in from Verizon. So they did all that engineering. Now we're basically getting into discussion on which Avaya product do we go with. We originally were told Aura by 2 vendors. We heard it from one. I did another needs assessment with another vendor on the state bid list. They came back with the same recommendation. We decided IP Office based on discussions with Josh as of this month. Neither of those other vendors recommended it, Don. You're correct. I don't think it may have been missed. It may have been a reason why they didn't. And now we're being asked to review that, which kind of like the 11th hour. I think that's where Josh was going, is how much time do we have to keep going through this? And I also, I'm not sure on the etiquette. I appreciate you allowing me to come before the committee today. And Fred can correct me if I'm wrong. We already sent this to the school committee and they voted on it to send it to the town. I don't have the ability to now propose a different solution right now. That would have to go back to school committee and they'd have to then re-vote and then resend it to the town, wouldn't we?
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, it's the school committee that is placing it on the warrant itself.
Right.
I think it's ultimately us, and I don't know the logistics, Lincoln or Justin, if you could correct that, because I thought we had the ability to place something on the warrant for capital.
I was just gonna add that the way that they're phrased in the warrant, it's to appropriate a sum of money to, and let me read it directly, pay Whitman's share of the cost to replace the telephone system. I think any of the solutions you're discussing now would meet that criteria. So I don't think there's necessarily a need to re-go through the school committee, because I think their vote was the same. They didn't vote the Aurora system, they voted to replace the telephone.
Exactly. Our vote, both in the facility subcommittee and on the school committee, was the vote to replace the system, not the Aurora system or the Moon system or whatever.
Now, there may be a kind of a need for the school's facility subcommittee to review the final decision, given the money that would be appropriated, but I don't know that we need to present to town meeting the specific technology used to replace the phone system.
Yeah, I think that's where we have to sort of trust our tech people, etc. I'm sorry, Lincoln, I didn't mean to.
No, it's, so if I could, Mr. Chairman, so it's on there now as a draft warrant at that dollar amount. But if investigations and work by the experts in the field determine over the next, in up to and including town meeting, that a lesser or more, but hopefully lesser dollar amount is needed, then the motion at town meeting could simply be that dollar amount. So to be clear, it absolutely, if the technical folks who have the knowledge of this determine over the next, right now at this moment, town meeting is May 3rd. If over that time, up until when town meeting occurs, that there's a determination that no, 133,000 for, well, let's use the Article 17. If $71,208 is not needed, it's only $60,000, then the motion at town meeting could simply reflect that. So I don't think there's any need per se to adjust the warrant article. It's simply, if there's some further knowledge, which I think I would certainly welcome, to determine that, a cheaper solution, better solution is identified, then all we need is to know that ahead of town meeting, or even at town meeting, but preferably before, and have a motion to reflect that amount.
If I can add, I am confident that between the phone calls that Josh and Steve have, the knowledge that they have, the people that they investigate with, I just want to make sure that every stone is unturned, so that, like Josh said earlier, so 2 years from now, we don't have something that says, yes, we got it cheaper, but we can't do something with it. And we feel that at this point in time, we were very comfortable with an all-in price. And if that's something that's different, then I would love the extra month, if it could be, or the extra 3 weeks, for these guys to make sure that we can leave no stone unturned to benefit everybody.
I agree.
Fred, go ahead.
Sounds good.
And the other thing to be cognizant of is anything that would be an annual occurrence of expense that would increase the operating budget, which we know is already strained to its max every year. That being said, Mr. Chair, if you would entertain a motion.
I have one more question on this topic. Is the Whitman Middle School in this scope?
That is correct, yes.
It is. So what do we do do we just archive all the end-of-line devices if we redo the middle school?
Yep, that was a question that Fred had actually asked when it reached the subcommittee at the school level, because he knew that we had the MSBA project on the horizon, and he didn't want to invest money towards it if it was just going to get wiped in 2 or 3 years if the project moves forward. We need to move forward based on the information we have. There's no guarantee that school project's going to move forward, but we did engage the vendors, and they confirmed that this equipment would still be usable in the school. It's not something that's going to be obsolete. We're just going to get new cabling in the new building, but the brain that they're putting in is going to be the same.
So to that point, it sounds like, so there's at least a month to determine, to do some, for the technical folks to do some more detailed analysis, if that's going to be helpful to determine if these are the right solutions and these are the right dollar amounts. So I guess my friendly challenge and ask for a promise would be, is that a sufficient amount of time for the folks to do that and to determine if this is the right amount or not? Just asking.
Definitely, from my side, I've already engaged the vendors. I have a meeting Monday to discuss one of the proposals that we received today. The second one I received at noontime. I'll reach out to them and ask them for a meeting with them, and I think that'll be enough time, but I don't know what I don't know. I'm going to have to rely on the vendors and their scheduling. I think it's enough time, but if for some reason they can't get back to us with it, I'll definitely keep the committee apprised, and I'll be in constant communication with Josh.
Yeah, and if Josh could run point on this, I mean, it's an ask, I know I went outside it tonight, but if Josh could run point with Steve on this, then I think we'd have the most accurate technical information from either side, so that we can at least be able to speak freely with, through Josh and through Steve.
Yeah, Josh has been, I think, we asked that of Josh earlier on, and I appreciate all his efforts that he's done. And so unless Josh disagrees, we'll just keep that line of communication open, and hopefully have more concrete numbers prior to or at town meeting. So
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll be able to have a better picture, I guess, at our next meeting. I don't know for sure, but I mean, we'll try to do what we can do. And I mean, vendors, unfortunately, it's you're at their mercy, like Steve had mentioned. So I mean, you can try to push them along as best we can to sort of get these meetings, set up and discuss these systems and figure out where we stand. And hopefully I'll be able to at least give you some type of, an update at the next meeting as to where we stand. But, I envision we'll have a definite answer and hopefully have a more concrete foundation of what we need to do moving forward before, well before town meeting. So.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Lincoln?
Just to be clear, I mean, I think, just to be clear on the roles and responsibilities, from my perspective, tell me if anyone feels differently, but from my perspective, Josh is sort of the town's expert, but as far as like the day-to-day communication with the vendors to determine, the investigation, it's a school project. I think it's the school folks doing that. And then Josh is sort of our expert witness, so to speak. So I just want to make sure that, we're all clear on what the roles and responsibilities are over the next month. That's all.
Yeah, I would think,
Does that match everyone's understanding?
yeah, the school will operate as its individual identity as it does, and then the school's representative and the town's representative will basically work together to gather facts and so we can all make the best decision for what's going to happen at town meeting.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so one last thing, Steve, just for our recording secretary, could you provide your full name?
Sure. Stephen Burke, B-U-R-K-E.
Thank you. All right. Fred, go ahead.
And just want to say, Josh has been, in communication with Steve with this, in that manner, and he's been a wonderful resource. And I just want to say thank you. It's appreciated.
Well,
You're welcome.
all right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just real quick, I just asked Steve and that team over there, they mentioned they had some assessment, sort of the information they had. I wonder if they could just share that with you to proliferate to the committee. I'd be interested to see what proposals they received.
George, is that a shareable document?
Yeah, she also gave it to us in email, in electronic format. So I'll make sure Michelle sends it over to you, Dave.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. All right. And so Fred, did you still want to move forward with a motion?
At this point, I don't know that it makes sense. I was going to make a motion that we that will be recommending the project, but if we have plenty of time, I just don't want to see it get bumped to the back of the bus, so to speak. I want to keep it up, as far up in our thoughts as possible.
Right. Yeah, that's the impression that I'm getting. That it's going to be not bumped down.
Do we need to act on anything for the FinCom sooner rather than later?
Yeah. So in terms of Whitman-Hanson Regional School District technology, do we have any other warrant articles?
Technology, the only other three articles we have, one is technology, is the high school fire panel. And then we also have the fire lane and the generator for the schools. And I think that's it for us.
Okay. So I don't want to keep the school district, school guys here any longer. Do they need to be here for anything else?
I think that it might be a benefit, for the school fire panel, and also if there's any questions on the fire lane. Okay. So to speak.
All right, fair enough. So we'll move down to Article 19 to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $34,500 to pay for Whitman's share of the cost to repair the existing fire lane around the high school or take any other action relative thereto. So I know Ernie had mentioned this a while back at one of our meetings. Fred had mentioned it, I think, again last meeting. Does anyone have any further questions on that? Go ahead, Justin.
Sure. Just the Hanson already funded their share of this, correct?
Well, and as well as Whitman has funded a portion of it.
Okay.
So this is it ran into some additional cost. So this is the additional cost. I don't have off the top of my head the recollection of how much. I don't know if George.
No, but this is the piece of the full project where you're talking about the drainage, the berm, the abilities to do it the proper way, especially now that it's both a fire lane. We talked to both chiefs, and it's also where it's a preschool drop off for their separate entrance. So this is the culminating project to do it the whole full steam to make it the full job completed.
George, can you? I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to. I'm sorry, I meant to reach out to the schools, not in the meeting, but can you tell us what's the total cost of the project?
You kill me. I don't know if I have that offhand, to be honest with you.
Okay. If you can get it to me, that'd be great. I just want to make sure because I know different pieces have been appropriated at different points. I just want to make sure I understood what the total all-in cost is. That's all. Thank you.
Yep. So the explanation that we took to the facility subcommittee was the existing roadway drainage is becoming more of a hazard due to increased groundwater shedding across the roadway. We are seeing increased ice conditions during winter weather. The town of Whitman appropriated $14,955 at the May 29th annual town meeting, Article 41, and supplemental funding needed because the total project cost is $82.5, which would make the Whitman total share $49.5. So when you take the whole project together, that's why there's the additional cost of $34.5 this time around on this article.
So it looks like doing the math, the approximate total cost is about $82,000. Does that sound
82,
right?
82.5, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on that from the committee? All right, we'll move to the Article 21, high school fire panel, to see if the town will vote. Yes.
Would you like a motion to recommend Article 19?
Well, let's get through the questions and
Okay.
answers, and we'll, that way we can cut
Sure.
George and Steve off and not keep them too late. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $44,400, which equals 60% of the total cost of a $74,000 project, to pay Whitman's share of a cost to replace existing outdated fire panel or take any other action relative thereto. Any questions?
You say what? Steve?
Definitely. So the existing fire panel at the high school is outdated. The vendor, Siemens, said that they can't get any more parts for it. It's best effort. And they've been trying to get in touch with our previous IT director. And we found email threads. Now that facilities has taken over the fire panels, Ernie Sandland, our facilities director, was reached out by Siemens. And this was the first time I believe he's heard about it because it was never getting to the right people. Siemens is very adamant that it needs to be replaced ASAP. So I'm just trying to show the urgency. Siemens has been trying to get this replaced for years. And now that we're aware of it, we're putting it before all the committees.
It's one of those things where it still works. However, when it doesn't, it can't be, it has to be replaced. It can't be repaired. If you remember, a lot of this was sort of like what happened at Conley, Whitman Middle, and Duval for a while. Like the fire panels still worked, but they were always outdated, and that's why they're being brought forward. This is just for the fire panel only. This isn't for the rest of the replacement, which would be the smokes and the heads and everything else, because that, although that was part of the tech recommendations, that's not economically feasible at this point in time. So we're really just talking about the brain, which is the fire panel right now.
And Siemens did confirm that the new panel is compatible with existing devices, so we don't have to worry about that, but we will eventually have a second phase of this. We'll replace all the heat detectors, smoke detectors, CO detectors. It just doesn't have to be done right now.
Okay. Any questions, Don?
Yeah, if we're going to be replacing later on down the road, the end-of-line devices, the heat detectors, smoke detectors, pull stations, and we're going to replace the brain right now with a fire alarm control panel, the front end. We have an opportunity to get multiple bids other than Siemens. If we just do half of the project and not the full project, we are locked into just Siemens. And
Right.
that kind of puts us in a position of not being able to competitively bid this. If we take the whole project as a global replacement of everything, the wiring is going to be the same no matter what manufacturer you use. But if we take this opportunity to globally replace everything, we could have multiple bidders bid on this project. It might benefit us. It's just my 2 cents.
I don't disagree, and as long as it's operable right now, that's fine. The worst case scenario is if it goes down, then we're just talking getting another emergency replacement, and we have to do what we have to do as far as occupancy and stuff like that. I don't have the price on me.
I don't in the email. So we do have the quotes from Siemens to do the entire project. We have quotes for the panel. We have quotes for the devices. And then we'd also have to have a third quote that Ernie gets because the proposals don't include electrical labor. Siemens said that we have to hire our own local electrician to actually install the devices. They only provide the equipment. So that's why if I send you the 2 quotes and then the estimate's higher, it's because we also have to incur labor that we need to include as the overall project. So if we were to bid this out as an entire project, it would be more than just the total of the 2 quotes. But I can share that with the committee if you'd like. I can send it to Mr. Cadero or George can.
Yeah, please do, just so we can review it.
Fred, did you have a question?
No, I'm just, we're at the 5-yard line, and I think that, we've, discussed these things, and we need to start moving forward. Whether or not we're going to recommend or not recommend. Granted, capital articles weren't in last October, but nobody had them in. But they've been, we've had them for a while, and I do want to see us move forward with the plan. The biggest issue that we have here is if this panel goes down, we're not looking at a $40,000 bill. We're probably looking at close to double that because we've got to pay, on the spot labor. If I'm not mistaken, the building can't even be occupied if that panel's down. Are we in a bad position because it's only Siemens? Perhaps. But at the same time, that's who we selected way back when we built the building, as being a good, solid, reputable company that's out there. That's, my feeling on this. I just wish we could move a little bit stronger with this instead of, all of a sudden we seem to have questions and pump brakes. And to me, that's something I'm cautious of right now.
I think I asked this question before though, Fred. I think I know I asked about the peripheral devices, and I was told that they were just swapped out recently and that they were in good condition. Now I'm just hearing something totally different.
Those peripherals, the smoke detectors have never been replaced. It's been on our capital plan for many, many years on those. Those are the ones that were original to when the high school opened.
Josh,
I don't know who would have said different.
I thought when we had Ernie in there and we were in the town hall when we had the meeting, I think when probably over a year ago now. I thought we discussed that.
I don't recall that at all.
Yeah, I know this topic has come up in the past, but I don't remember the details. Go ahead, Josh.
So Fred, to your comment, the high school system is the original system, was part of the high school, and we didn't select it when we built the high school. It was part of the bid process. So unfortunately, it wasn't that we said, yeah, we want Siemens. Unfortunately, it was, that's what the, all the equipment that was put into the high school was a bidding process. So unfortunately, again, it wasn't something that we just said, yeah, let's just, try Siemens out and see how it works. I mean,
I recall, and when I say we, I'm talking about me being on that building committee.
Yeah.
And I can remember there being discussion about what systems, the boilers, for instance, that were going to be put into the request for proposal and the specs. We had meeting after meeting with AI3, the architects, on all the different systems.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
there was discussion as to what they were putting in.
Yeah, believe me, it would be nice to actually be able to write an RFI for a specific product, believe me, but it's just not that easy. Unfortunately, there's a multitude of different solutions out there. And don't get me wrong, I agree, we certainly need to do something about it, and it needs to be done. And frankly, unfortunately, there are, several solutions that are proprietary, and unfortunately, once you put it in, you're tied to them. And, unfortunately, there's, not much you can do other than obviously replacing it with an entirely different solution. So.
Okay. Any further questions on that? So before I forget, George and Steve, Fred did allude to something that I just want to have a quick discussion on, and that's there's an article that was passed in 2015 that established this committee. Part of that article defined our responsibilities, and also stated that see if I can find it real quick. Requests for capital spending shall be submitted to the committee by October 1st of each year, and the committee shall evaluate and prioritize requests in order to prepare a capital budget and present requests for funding to town meeting. No appropriation, blah, 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 blah. No appropriation greater than $10,000 for capital purchases or improvements shall be considered for funding at town meeting unless such request has been submitted and reviewed by the committee, except where there's a unforeseen circumstance. So I had mentioned, well, last time Ernie was in, I mentioned that's one of our goals next year is to have department heads provide capital requests by October 1st to this committee. And Ernie did mention that he has no problem with that deadline. So I just want to make sure that you guys were aware of that as well.
Yeah, we have a capital matrix that God, I think it's older than I am, but we continue to keep updating it, we keep moving it on, and then we just normally our process is then to go through the facility subcommittee and then bring you just what we have. But if you want either a copy of the whole thing and then, or if you just want the prioritized list just on October 1st, that can take place. That's no problem.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we have. So are we finished on the fire panel one?
I guess if we're not ready to move forward with a motion,
Well, yeah. Let you know. We can take motions and votes. But my goal now is just to shorten George and Steve's time.
Sure.
Tonight.
Thank you.
So the last one is the Duval and Conley School emergency generator, to see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of money from free cash and or available funds, or borrow a sum of $40,000 for additional funding needed to complete the emergency generator project, and transfer a switch or take any other action relative thereto. So anyone watching, and for new members, the last year, the school committee had first presented to this committee having a mobile generator to transfer between two schools. It was discussed that at this committee and funding approved through town meeting that they should probably have two set generators at the town, and with the knowledge that the funding amount at that time probably was not adequate. So they're just asking for another $40,000 to finish the project. So I'm not sure if anyone has any further questions on that.
No, you're correct. And, we've tried to lay the cement pads at the same time. We've tried to make sure everything can be done to maximize the economic aspect of what the cost is. So what we're trying to do is say, okay, we have the generators. How do we get this done both times, both places with the same, electrician, same contractors, so that we don't have to stop the project, revisit it, and then go from there. So that's why the additional 40,000 is needed.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns on that? All right. If I'm correct, that's all the school
Sure.
capital articles, correct? 1, 2,
Correct.
3, 4, 5. All right, George, Steve, unless you have anything else for us, we'll cut you loose.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure, just to confirm before we disconnect, my homework is I'm going to forward you the fire panel quotes for the full project. You wanted the finding assessments forwarded over in digital format, and I'm also going to report back through Josh on any additional phone system updates we can provide, hopefully get the cost down. Was there anything else that the committee wanted from me?
Goals by October 1st.
for the next round.
I got you, brother. All right.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good evening, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll just move on with the agenda. Taken kind of out of order, I'd just like to introduce Justin Casanova Davis, new to our committee. I don't know, Justin, you want to say hi or anything?
Yeah, I'll say hello. I'm glad to be here. I'm a relatively new resident. I purchased my home in September. And I'm the assistant town administrator in Brookline. I was a principal budget analyst in Cambridge, so I'm well aware of budgeting and capital planning. So excited to be here. Thank you.
All right, great.
Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome, Justin.
All right. So
Is Aaron still with us, or is Aaron gone?
Aaron has not been in this meeting today. He emailed me earlier saying he wasn't going to be present.
Okay.
Lincoln, you want to go ahead with the town administrator report?
Sure. I don't think I have too much new that the committee hasn't heard. except that obviously there's a draft warrant that everyone's received. Certainly, I think the chairman's desire is to go through that, piece by piece, but if anybody has any offline questions about it, whether offline or here in the meeting, obviously I'm happy to answer any of those. And I think I mentioned this to the committee. This obviously isn't like directly in your orbit, but just so everyone knows, so everyone's on the same page, I'll be presenting a recommended balanced budget to a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee on April 13th, to be clear, the operating budget. So that's not, directly related to our capital charge, obviously, but just so everyone is aware of that. Certainly, and again, I think I mentioned this, but it's probably worth repeating, bears repeating, which is, certainly with the schools assessment and in combination with the town's needs of continuing to provide the level service, level funding services, level funding for services that we're providing now, there'll certainly be a big strain on the budget, and thus almost certainly using a larger amount of free cash to fund our operating budget with what the school assessment is now and what the needs are for level services for the town. And obviously, if there's less free cash, that is the primary source of our capital expenditures. So that's an open question at the moment, since in particular, we don't really know if there may be an adjustment to the school assessment number. But certainly if there isn't an adjustment to the school assessment number, it will be very difficult to fund our capital program this year, or significant portions of it, since that use of free cash is our traditional source of funding for our capital program. So I know that's unsatisfying probably to have some uncertainty, but that uncertainty is the fact of the matter at the moment. So, but obviously happy to take any questions or concerns about any of that.
So
Personally, I
I'd
think
just
it's a
like-
good thing. Not a good thing, but I think it's good that we know what we have in the piggy bank
Mhm.
to be able to spend. I think, without knowing that, we're going to get ourselves in trouble. So I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, and curiously, so this is some of the discussion that I think some folks sort of may have heard, but the difference, everybody on this committee, I think, is well aware of the Madden report that we've been looking at as we're pursuing an operating budget and what that looks like going forward. So as a reminder to folks, the Madden report says that if a year-over-year increase of 5% in the school's assessment, to Whitman, if that continues, that we will need an override. The report actually says fiscal year 2022, our upcoming year, but that is certainly not in the cards for this year, but certainly it's on its way. The amount of monies in the currently certified assessment from the school committee is that amount is approximately $450,000 over and above that 5% increase in the assessment. And so coincidentally, the amount of the school's capital requests is approximately the amount of the assessment increase, between 5% and that. So it's an interesting coincidence, but it's true and it's a fact. So
It's just a coincidence.
is it a pure coincidence, Fred?
Honestly, it's gotta be. It's gotta be.
It certainly
you
is
will
an
find-
interesting coincidence.
You will find on April 7th, our meeting is going to be devoted entirely to the budget, pretty much. And we will see what happens on that evening, so to speak.
Lincoln, you kind of lead me to a question that I've had and we've posed in this committee in the past. Part of our responsibility at this committee is to prioritize. So, how do we define that? Do we define that as prioritize based on the amount of funds that we have, or prioritize in order of need and without consideration of available funds? I don't know if you have a comment on that or anyone has a comment on that. I know we've discussed it a few times in the past. But I don't know if I want to bring it up now. It's 'cause it does. I don't know. I don't know if we've ever settled this issue. Anybody? No? All right.
Well, I was under the impression that it was our role to basically look at the validity of a project and see if it was viable, and basically the need was there. And then it was up to the finance committee to fund it, if it could be funded. That's where I thought the demarcation was of roles. I could be wrong. Maybe there should be some type of overlap where Lincoln or Dave, you're with the finance committee too, we could kind of, understand that if we're talking about a proposed capital expenditure that we just can't fund, why even bring it to the table right now? Some of those things should probably be vetted out right at the beginning. If it can't be funded, what are we talking about? Or if we do have plenty of funding, maybe bring more to the table. I don't know. But I always thought that was where our roles were.
All right.
So-
I heard you go down one path, and then I heard you revert back down to a different path.
Well, I think it's helpful to know if there's no funding, why even talk about a big project, right? If the funding isn't there. I mean, unless it's an absolute emergency like the sewer main or something like that way we'd have to either go for an override or something that's drastically needed. But if it's, I don't want to talk about the projects we just talked about, but if it's, a fire alarm system that might just be outdated, but still works, maybe we can buy another year or 6 months and just do added testing or something like that. There's, or maybe we do have the funding. So I think it's beneficial that we know where the money's coming from, if it's even there.
Justin Evans, you had a question?
Yeah, so I know that the bylaw was a little left it open to interpretation, but the Collins Center capital improvement plan that we had put together about 2 years ago did basically prioritize projects. They ranked projects to present to the town, but one of the larger considerations in the ranking was our funds available from outside sources. So it's just you can't really answer completely in one direction without considering the other.
Go ahead, Lincoln.
And just to be clear, and so I really appreciate Fred's efforts on that assessment issue and his.
I can
that's-
prove it, though. I can prove it.
I believe you.
They
Fred.
wanted to add fans onto the warrant, and we took them off because it's not imperative. The need is there, but it's not a prioritized need. And with COVID, you don't want to be swirling the air around at this time anyways. So otherwise, we would have ended up being even more money.
I 100% believe you, and and I appreciate your efforts. Next week on looking at what the assessment number is. I would say, setting aside, if in fact, there is the school committees, or the players that are able to look at the assessment number, setting that aside. And if there is, the possibility for some movement on that, then there is, to be clear, we do have room for our current capital program for those items that would be funded traditionally by free cash to fund our program this year. So unfortunately or unfortunately, the school's assessment number is the determining factor in what pieces of our capital program we are going to be able to do this year. But as far as those pieces that wouldn't be funded from water sewer enterprise, or basically, that we're looking at free cash, and we can pursue our program this year with the amount of free cash that we have, setting aside that assessment issue.
So just to be fair, Lincoln, I think a school advocate may take what you said the wrong way, and let me try to rephrase it without changing a meaning. There are, of all the department heads who have increased budget requests, the school committee as a department head has the largest school request that if granted would severely affect. Is that a
That's a better way of putting it, and I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, can I comment real quickly? I think, I mean, I don't know if it's any different than any other year, to be honest with you. I mean, I think looking at the school's overall budget, nothing against the schools at all in this comment that I'm making, but their budget is, I think, 75% or at least 65% of our overall budget. So, I think their needs or requirements certainly drive what else is remaining that can be done. Is that accurate?
I lost you. Can you repeat that last part?
I said, I think based on the fact that the school district's budget is most likely like 65 or 70% of our overall budget, I think they drive a lot of what we, a lot of whatever their needs or requirements are, drive what else we can do, after just, figuring out the funding.
Yeah, they're the biggest driver, and everybody else are smaller drivers.
Right. So again, I don't think it's any different than any other year, other than the fact that obviously the percentage of what, is being requested, I think is the, point that they're trying to get across.
Yep.
Chair?
Yes.
And, I'll try and, I've said this so many times, I think it just rolls off my tongue. The biggest problem with the school budget is our revenue stream. 49% of our revenue stream now is Chapter 70 funding. Chapter 70 funding from the state is increasing at less than 0.5% annually. So if our budget goes up 2 or 3%, and half of your revenues can only go up 0.5%, then you're looking at your two towns to not only fill their obligation, but also the balance of the state's obligation. It's a no lose, no win situation. I wish I knew how we could make our budget sustainable. I've said this in our meeting last week. I was the one dissenting vote, but I'll stand behind my committee because it's a committee as a whole, for the budget itself. I feel personally the town of Whitman is being fair to us with the amount of new growth that we get, the amount of levy capacity that we can raise, and to say, hey, you guys can have 75, 76% of it. Our budget or our allocated dollars are far higher percentage-wise than any other department in town. And the town does look to take care of us. And at least from my aspect, I'm cognizant of it and appreciative of it. Somehow it's just not enough to feed the beast. And that's the biggest problem. And if I could solve this problem, I could just take it, bring it to every town, 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and I'd be a multimillionaire if I could ever solve that. So,
Josh.
Yeah, I don't want to drag our meeting out here, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think the bigger, problem at this point is the fact that, the town spent money to have the financial situation evaluated, and the Madden report came back saying, no more than 5%. And then when you're looking at a 10% or over 5% assessment, I think that's what really, sets the alarm off and says, wait a minute here. Like, we talked about this and the standard is, X, and why are we doing Z,
The only thing I'll say, and I'll defend our superintendent to a degree here, he's charged with putting forward a budget that's educationally sound. That is his, first consideration as to what his needs are, and then unfortunately we have this time period where it's back and forth, to how do you make it and what are the grim realities, and I'm hopeful that, grim realities aside, or see what happens, next week when we meet and go from there.
Okay. So that was the town administrator's report. Anything else, Lincoln?
And I just wanted to clarify one thing. When I talk about, we have setting aside the conversation about the schools, we have a sustainable, and able to do capital program. The exception to that is, what happens with the DPW building this year. So I just want to be clear on that. Everything else in the capital plan, we can do this with our traditional funding source of free cash. That's all.
Okay. Well, while we're on the
Just to
subject,
clarify that.
has the Board of Selectmen received the feasibility study? I haven't seen anything come across.
We have not.
All right. All right. Is that all that you have for the town administrator report?
It is. Thank you, Dave.
Okay. All right. So in terms of the finance committee, the chairman has asked this committee when we anticipate having our recommendations brought forth from our committee for capital warrant request from our committee to theirs. I mentioned to him that we've only this is our first meet. This would have been our first meeting where we've actually also had a copy of the draft warrant. So we hadn't made any votes yet, but our goal is to have our votes in order for them to be published on the warrant. Obviously, that doesn't have to happen, but me personally, I would like to have that happen just so it provides some clarification on what this committee, without having to go up and discuss every vote that we've had, to have it published right in on the town warrant. I did watch the well, you saw communications that I've had with the DPW superintendent and commissioner. So with the forced sewer main, they had sent over a revised cost estimate. In their meeting, they had agreed to remove the alt add-ons, which was basically try to utilize the original pipe as a redundant source and rehab it. So they removed those costs. However, in reviewing the cost estimate, what they have discovered is that they did not have costs in the estimate for replacing the entire water main line along Auburn Street. So even though that they had removed activities, the alt add-ons, they added activities, so the cost estimate is still just about $16 million. So I've sent this committee that cost estimate, communication that I've had. When I sent that email to I sent an email to the commissioner and the superintendent saying, hey, I don't understand why there's not a cost savings. However, subsequent to that email, they met with the Board of Selectmen and explained why there's no cost savings. And I guess that's why the estimate has remained at the $6 million mark, because of a miscommunication of how long of a water line they wanted to replace. So when it was described, it went from a small portion of water line to a longer portion of water line. I don't know. I asked for an apples to apples line item comparison because I did notice some line items were removed, some were decreased in value, some were increased in value. So I couldn't figure out why, if a project was changing, why a certain line item that had been there in the past either decreased or increased. I'm not sure if we're going to ever get that cost. I asked if we could have that cost estimate prior to this meeting. We haven't received it, and I'm not sure if we're ever going to receive it prior to town meeting. So I think we've made every attempt to vet this project out and get all the information out there. Things have now changed a little bit.
Dave, can I ask one thing about that?
Yeah.
Do those have to go consecutive? One sewer and one water main, one supply, one's drain. Do they need to be commingled, these projects? I mean, is there a cost savings to do it?
Yeah,
mean-
so it's my understanding that the water main is in close proximity to the sewer line.
So
So,
they're already mobilized there.
right,
All right, I got you.
right. And it's just now it's just a longer length of water line that they're going to be doing.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, the other idea is that you have the trench open, right? And you have the road is already open. So the theory is that, rather than replacing that water line in 10, 15 years, whatever the case may be, rather than open up that road again at that time. That's the reasoning.
Okay.
So when you sell your house, just tell them that they get a nice new water line there and increase the value to your house. So I don't know. I don't know if there's any more information that we can provide on that. I can't provide any more information. I don't know if it's worth. I don't know if anyone believes that it would be helpful for them to come back in and discuss it. I don't know. Me personally, I don't. Go ahead, Justin.
If I could just add to what you said there, I watched the commissioner's last meeting as well, and they did have a significant discussion about the use of retained earnings as a method to reduce the raise in the rates to pay for it. So the project would still cost, $14.5 million, but they are considering not putting the entire bond payment on the ratepayers. Well, retained earnings still comes from the ratepayers, but rather than increasing the rates to pay for the entire project.
Yeah, the increase in rates is something I don't want to really get into.
Yeah. But actually, Dave, if I go back to your first comment about the chair of the finance committee asking for a kind of a timeline for us, just quickly glancing at everything, we've got meetings scheduled the next 2 Thursdays. By the 15th, we'll have the proposed balanced budget from the town administrator. That's probably a good time for us to maybe vote the capital articles.
Okay.
If we could hear from the superintendents of both public works departments on a number of these articles, like that makes up the bulk of what we have left.
Well, yeah, so that was my next question was, do we believe that of the capital articles that we have here, do we need, which ones do we need, which ones do we have questions on and which we would need the department heads to come in and explain to us? So keep that in mind. I just want to keep going with the finance committee report. Yeah, so Lincoln had mentioned earlier the finance committee is going to meet with a joint meeting with the board of selectmen to discuss the hopefully a balanced Article 2, and Lincoln's going to present that. I think you're going to be presented. I hope there's not going to be much discussion because that will lead for a long meeting. So I hadn't thought of this before, Lincoln, but now it comes to mind is once you present that Article 2, will you have an idea of what is available for free cash?
Yes, dependent on the school committee's action. And thank you, Fred.
Okay, all right. So that's good. So we'll have a number. So when that meeting comes, sometime after that meeting, could you just be prepared to have that dollar figure available?
Certainly.
Thank you. So now, so that's it for the finance committee. One thing I did want to get everyone's opinion on is whether or not it would be a good idea for this committee to vote on or make any comment on the DPW warrant article, seeing that there's no feasibility study available. Even if there was a feasibility study available between now and town meeting, or not available, does it make sense to have this committee make a vote on that? So I'm just gonna, this isn't a binding vote, but I'd just like to get everyone's opinion. I'll start with mine. I personally don't think it's a good idea for this committee to be voting on it. I think there's a better way to approach it, especially with the feasibility study. First step, there being a feasibility study, and then a step two, and then hopefully getting it onto the next special town or town meeting. So I'll just kind of go around the room. Fred, do you have an opinion on it either way?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's proper for us to be voting on it because I don't think there's anything to vote on. I definitively would not have a problem with some sort of a statement from this committee saying that we do support such a project, pending all of the information needed to make a viable decision. That we recognize the fact that that building is old, decrepit, it is not a good work environment and does need to be replaced.
Okay, so I'll back up to me, but it's just saying on you real quick, Fred. So is it your opinion that this project is a need for the town of Whitman?
It's a need.
Okay.
Before we could say we're recommending the project, what if they come back at us and say they want that Taj Mahal that they had asked for last time, only now it's, $40 million.
Okay.
Theoretically, I don't see myself being able to recommend that.
Okay.
But as far as being cognizant and recognizing the fact that the building is old and needs to be replaced and we do need to do something,
yeah,
I feel very comfortable in that type of a statement.
All right, I'll go back to me. Yes, I believe the need is there, but I don't think it's appropriate for us to vote on it just yet. So if people could provide opinion or abstain from those two questions. Justin Evans, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Clearly this is, since I joined this committee, this has been the thing we've talked about the most, with probably the generators being the next most talked about items. It's definitely a need, but I would rather see a full proposal put forward to a future town meeting that has a better chance of succeeding. I don't think that they, unless this is fully vetted, I don't know that it may be doomed to fail if we put it forward too soon.
Okay. Don, do you have an opinion either way on both those items?
I kind of lean to Justin. I think he articulated it perfectly. I think it's needed. I think it's 100% needed. I think everybody that drives by that building knows that it's needed. But I think a full-blown proposal or plan in place needs to be presented.
Okay. Josh?
Yeah, there's no question that we certainly need to move forward. I think, I'll mimic what everyone else said essentially. And, the fact that, we definitely need to move forward with it. It's just a matter of, making sure we have the right plan, if you will, in order to succeed. And I hate to, rush to the finish line, if you will, and then fail at the ballot box or fail at the point where, unfortunately it's too late. So.
Okay. Bob, do you have an opinion either way?
I do. Well, as you know, I've been working on this for 12 years. So I think it's one of the most important projects we have coming up. And my concern is that if we try to put something on town meeting at this point, it's just not enough time for us to become familiar enough to make a good recommendation. So, I think we're going to have to go to a special town meeting or even wait till next year.
Okay. Justin Kavanaugh, Davis, do you want to comment at all?
Yeah, from my understanding, there is a need for this. I think everyone's articulated well that there's a need for it, but we got to make sure that we vet a good plan, present a good plan before town meeting, a plan that we vetted and make sure it makes sense. So I wouldn't feel comfortable voting for anything now, but let's have them present the plan and articulate it well to the voters.
Okay. And Lincoln, do you have a comment either way?
The committee is in consensus. So I clearly there is a need for that building. There's a need for a better working environment there. I know I'm committed to getting that done. I think hopefully we have a good feasibility study done in the next few weeks, and hopefully that gives a clear picture as to what the cost will be. And I know what I would intend to do is to come forward with an article that would create architectural plans to attempt to pass an article that would allow for the creation of architectural plans over the next 6 months to a year, and then come back with a fully vetted plan that we're talking about, so we know exactly what it's going to look like and exactly how big it's going to be, at a special town meeting this fall or a year from now.
Okay, all right, so you put a new twist to it in mentioning a special town meeting in the fall. So, you know, what I would anticipate, I would anticipate the DPW commissioners presenting, well, they would need to present more, well, unless, let me think about this for a second. So right now they have a funding source for a capital warrant article that include a feasibility study. So the architectural plans that would not fall under a feasibility study, would it? No.
No, so typically you'd be looking at, to get good architectural renderings, you typically be looking at about 10% of the full construction cost. Bob, are you in concurrence on that?
Yeah,
Typically about 10%.
I was under the understanding that we'll get a conceptual floor plan from this feasibility study. That's what happened with the police station. So we ended up putting it out to bid. But I agree with Lincoln in the fact we should get, maybe we should just put it out for design and have the design ready instead of having to put it out to bid and not know what we're going to get. So I agree with that. I think we should fund the design.
And we wouldn't, and to be clear, I mean, so if that's depending on what the feasibility study says with respect to the total project cost, getting architectural drawings, would be a significant expense and would, we have limited free cash, right? So we'd have to determine how that would be funded. But I think that's the way to go to get towards actually having a new DPW building that's needed within the next few years.
Okay. All right. So then in terms of timeliness, so they would need to request the funding for a architectural drawings if a special town meeting were to occur. And then that hopefully they would have that available by done and available by town meeting in order for funding a article for the actual building.
Right. And to be clear, we don't know how quickly it can be done, but it's perhaps more realistic to look at funding the actual project a year from now. But time will tell, right?
Yeah.
Well, we already funded the conceptual drawings. Is that correct, Bob?
Yes.
So
We funded a feasibility study, which may give us more than you think it would give us. It will likely give us a crude design of the building. But that's something that we need to discuss along with the commissioners for whether or not that's going to be appropriate.
So that's already been funded, and why don't we wait till we see what comes back to us before we, talk about architects or anything like that. Let's just see what we have. If it's good enough to bring to town meeting, maybe we can, or maybe we need additional information. But I think let's see what we paid for. Let's get it in our hands.
All right. So that feasibility, it may be likely that upon receipt of that feasibility study, we may have questions on that study, and then have their vendor come in and discuss that. So I would anticipate having some kind of meeting sometime after that feasibility study is publicly provided. All right. All right. So going in the draft warrant, everyone's received a copy of that so far this week. We have, just going through it real quick, we have a warrant articles that include, so Lincoln, maybe you could help me. So P2, the fire department supplemental appropriation. So that's a part of that is a expenditure of funds to the fire department expense. Would that be something within our purview?
I would suggest not. It's an operating. It's an operating cost.
All right, so then there's P3, which is the Hoag Memorial Drive. Dennis had mentioned that they wanted to finish up the roadway there based on a past water project that they had. Does anyone believe that we need further clarification on that?
No.
Just, there is a sum of money that should be turned back that wasn't expended on the other project. Remember how they wanted to sort of borrow from one and get done the other? Maybe just so we're just cognizant, and Lincoln's perhaps cognizant of the fact that there will be money coming back to be certified for free cash for next year.
Well, it depends on what the funding source was. The funding source might have been water and retained earnings, water and sewer retained earnings.
Sure, okay. Then they get their own money back.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think actually it is now that we talk about it.
Now that you say that.
So this is to supplement a previous appropriation that was insufficient for this. But I can tell you that Josh can tell you this. So we've been in communication with all the department heads to make sure any older capital items, whether it came from water, sewer retained earnings or free cash or any other source, making sure that ones older than 2 years that they're being followed up on, and either there's a concrete plan to finish the project, or we'll close out some of those projects if the project is no longer needed, or if there are more funds. So if there is any other project that's outstanding from water, sewer retained earnings or free cash or anything else, and it is there isn't a concrete plan to move forward with it in the near future, and it's outstanding more than 2 years, we will be closing those out and returning it to water, sewer retained earnings or free cash or whatever the original funding source was.
All right.
Mr. Chair, through you.
Yes. Yeah.
Lincoln, are you aware of the Duval School roof situation and the monies that are set aside for that?
Generally, yes. Yeah.
I just want to make sure those monies didn't get closed out.
No, it's a conversation. I think I definitely want to have that offline and figure out, do we need the entire amount? I definitely recognize that there's an amount needed. As far as whether or not the entire 500,000 is needed right now, it's definitely something I want to talk about offline maybe, but
We're crossing our fingers for an earmark for the balance, and then we'll need all of it.
yeah. And so maybe, but I definitely recognize there's some money needed there. I think I just want to have a conversation with whomever from the schools about if the entire amount is needed now.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so moving on to the sewer force main, Justin Casanova Davis may want to watch some past meetings that have the DPW commissioners
I've
expert.
watched them. I'm
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
new to this project, yeah.
All right, perfect.
Hands prepared.
Watch out, Lincoln. DPW building we discussed. So A7 is a water pickup and meter radio reading equipment to see if the town will vote and raise appropriate 29,000 to purchase and equip a medium-sized pickup truck and purchase and install water meter radio reading equipment in a said truck or take any action thereof. I mean, I haven't asked them questions on this, but I know this is based on the description. It's associated with the past warrant article that approved the water meter replacement project, which the water meters are now radio. I don't know how you describe that. Radio transmitting.
Radio read.
Yeah, and then I'm assuming obviously this vehicle is associated with that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And maybe this is at a very late hour. It's the first time I've seen this article. And Justin, you were alluding to this earlier when we were talking about the schools fleet, so to speak. I don't know if there are any electric vehicle funds or any grants, because does it need to be a truck or just a vehicle that can drive up and down the streets? And if they could utilize something that was electric and be able to get a grant for it, like we were for our food delivery, little van, so to speak, you know, it could be almost a free vehicle, so to speak.
That's a good question. So, you know, in regards to our past discussions regarding a formalized form, part of that form includes a check mark for, you know, our CPA or other funding sources available or potentially available for this project. So is that a question that you would want to present to the DPW?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Did you feel that they need to come in to answer that, or maybe I could just shoot it by email?
If you could shoot an email and, you know, get back to everyone, that'd be, I think, sufficient. Josh is.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just quickly, I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but you know, the current vehicles are, I think, I don't know, say a 2006, maybe Ford Ranger. So I think they're probably looking at something similar to that, maybe, you know, I don't know for sure, but just something basically that they could use to, because right now they have the old Ford Ranger equipped with a tablet that they're able to drive around and get radio reads for the meters. Whereas, you know, prior to this, they were using a laptop on the seat, and they literally had to, you know, I don't know if it was being done while they were driving, but it's kind of, it seems, you know, when you're putting up all this, think about driving and texting while driving and doing all that fun stuff. I mean, you can't drive around trying to read meters at the same time you're trying to drive the vehicle. So, you know, I just think they're looking for something that, you know, allows them to continue operating the way they currently do. But I agree. I mean, if there's some, you know, grant opportunity out there to, you know, an electric vehicle makes more sense, then hey, so be it, you know.
Okay, so the question I have is there an ability to use, is a pickup truck necessary? Is it available? Is an electric vehicle or something smaller available to use? Other funding sources? Is this vehicle going to be used for multi-sources or just for the meter radio reading? And you know, is this a replacement or an addition? So I'm assuming the big factor is whether or not this is going to be a dedicated vehicle or not. If it's not a dedicated vehicle, I'm assuming they would need more a certain type of vehicle. But if it's a dedicated vehicle, I'm kind of leaning towards Fred's questions.
I mean,
Based on their,
$49,000, it can't be much of a vehicle. It's not something that they're putting a plow on or
no.
even a half-ton four-wheel drive pickup.
But again, I mean, it could be a multi-purpose vehicle, you know, depending on, you know, what their idea is. I don't know, you know, definitely be better to have them at least provide the synopsis on what they're, you know, requesting specifically. But, you know, again, if there's alternatives, there's alternatives. If there's grant money, there's, you know, grant money for it, then, you know, so be it. We take advantage of it.
All
And,
right.
yeah, Dave, just kind of on that train of thinking. Last year, we did get a small green communities grant for a hybrid police cruiser. So there is, I don't know if we can still hit green communities, but there's still money available for that kind of project.
Or we could put the meters in a police vehicle.
And they could
They
do
already
it
have the
faster.
laptop set up.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because yeah, they had mentioned that last year. Unfortunately, the police vehicles are twice as much money, you know, 60,000 instead of 30,000. So.
All right. So I got those questions. So this is new to us. Article 8, to see if the town will vote to appropriate from available funds the sum of $29,528 to replace broken and worn parts at the town park playground or take any action relative thereto. Bob, go ahead. You're muted.
You're on mute, Bob.
Sorry. Last fall, I did an inspection of the playground and I found some things that needed repair, and I notified Bruce Martin from the DPW, and I called a certified playground inspector, and the DPW allowed me to hire that person. They went through the whole playground and they found a lot of things that were wearing out, and so they had come up with a list of things we needed to do, and I think Bruce got a price to replace everything that needed to be replaced. And based on our conversation, most of the money that was going to be used to make these repairs was for the equipment itself. It wasn't a lot of labor. So I recommend that we go forward this as soon as we can.
Okay, so is there a text report or is it just a cost estimate?
There is a report and I can get that to you.
Okay. Okay. And I'm assuming there's a cost estimate as well?
I'm sorry?
A cost estimate to go along with that?
Yeah, there is. It's a full breakdown.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that's easy. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
to replace that type of playground, you're probably talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. So to maintain it, and I don't think we've spent much in maintenance on it over the past few years anyways. I think it's money very, very wisely spent.
Yeah, I was just looking through, 2000, I think 2017 and 2018, I don't think, as far back as 2017, I don't think we put any money into it, or there's been no capital articles associated with that. All right, Article 9, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate 64,000 to purchase equipment and plow of a 4-wheel drive 1-ton truck or take any action relative thereto. I know Dennis had discussed this in the past. Bruce may have been involved at one point discussing it. I don't know if anyone has any further questions on this article.
Is it possible to get an inventory list of the DPW fleet? And when they're asking for something, is this replacing the current vehicle and what it's replacing? Or,
This-
and, you
Yeah,
know,
this is replacing a 2003, which is in very rough shape. I've seen it with my own eyes. There are holes in the floorboard. But
you patch the
will-
holes, can the schools have it?
Sure, you can have it, Fred.
$64,000.
Yeah, but I can get you, I can get you an inventory list, Fred.
Just curious, and because if they're replacing vehicles that are all still have a little bit of life in them, you know, beggars can't be choosers, and I think the schools would be glad to try and take other crumbs, so to speak.
You want the truck with the holes in the floor?
Yeah,
Really?
no, I don't think he wants
Maybe the ones
that.
a little bit nicer.
You can have it.
Yeah, but we're not paying maintenance on it next year.
Yeah, I'll put it in your driveway, Fred.
It's all yours, Fred. I'm serious. It's all yours.
Yeah, right in your driveway.
So to Article 10, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $156,268 to purchase and equip a 39,000-pound GVW dump truck with snow plow or take any other action thereto. I believe this is a replacement as well. Lincoln, right? It's a replacement.
That's correct.
Does
Yeah,
anyone? Go ahead.
Sorry, it's actually 156,286, not 68.
It's getting late, sorry. That's my bedtime. All right, so does anyone think we need further clarification on that one from DPW?
No.
Article 11. Truck lift system, DPW commissioners, I mentioned that one. I think we discussed it during our last meeting. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate 46,000 to purchase a comparable column truck lift system or take any action relative thereto. I think we've heard a lot on this. Does anyone have any questions on that? Actually, I would have one question is if a DPW building, well, they have an immediate, I remember them discussing it was immediate need, but if town meeting were to approve this, would this be a piece of equipment that would be used after?
Yes,
Yes.
It would, okay.
yeah, they
Yes,
can move it
it-
over to the new building.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Street resurfacing, I don't think that's within our purview. Lincoln, is that your opinion?
I mean, I certainly think we could give an opinion on it. It's a capital item, but if you don't want to, I think
No, that's fine.
you could definitely interpret it a different way. Yeah.
Yeah. I know every year, it's to see if the town will appropriate a sum of money for the purpose of resurfacing or installing surface treatments, engineering services, granite purchases and line painting various town streets or takes any actions there too. I know, I think almost maybe 2-3 consecutive years, this is a supplement to Chapter 90 funds.
That's right.
I think almost at least in the past 3 years, we've supplemented some sum of money, if I
We
remember
have.
correctly.
That's correct.
Typically
that's a
about
good thing.
$100,000.
Correct. I clarified the request. It wasn't entirely clear from the original request from the DPW, but I clarified the request that the request is for $100,000. That's correct.
Anyone have any further questions on that? Think we need DPW? Okay. Sidewalk repair, to see if the town will raise and appropriate $50,000 for the purpose of repairing, replacing, or installing sidewalks in various towns. Take any action there too. The last time they had funding for that. Oh, I thought I wrote down. Was in either 2018 or 2017. So this is again supplement to their normal operating expense to repair sidewalks. And if I'm assuming, maybe I'm putting words into this article, but it's generally for, I think they self-perform the work, if I remember correctly.
Most of it would be performed in-house,
Yeah.
yes. It would depend on which exact project they're working on, but most of it, yes, would be done in-house.
Okay. Anyone think we need any further clarification on that? Okay. Armory building roof, to see if the town will vote and raise appropriate $35,000 to repair the Armory building roof or take any other action there too. Bob, I think you spoke on this in the past.
We had actually been looking at this for the last 7 years. So we did hire a company to come in and do some repairs as shingles blew off. I think it's time with that we replace it. We'll use an architect shingle and they will last probably 35 years.
Is that a full replacement, full shingle?
It'll be all the shingles, the asphalt shingles. It
Yeah.
doesn't include the flat roof. And we did have someone look at that and they said it was okay for now. I think when we get going on this, we'll evaluate that again and determine.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on that one?
I think this one gets tossed aside pretty much every year.
It has been, yeah.
Yeah, so.
All right. Replace fire department.
Well, hold on.
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
Is it leaking right now?
No, but we're losing shingles in the windstorms and some of them don't match. It's never been, well, it hasn't been replaced since we took possession of it for sure. And we've done several repairs.
Well, my feeling is it all starts at the roof. If you can keep
Yeah.
water out of a building, you're gonna keep the building. If you,
Right, and if we don't do it, if we don't get it done with shortly, we're going to have some bigger repairs, so.
so, yeah, I mean, for, what was it, 38 grand?
35.
35.
35.
I think we do that and we save the building, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
That's,
Bob, do you know when we took ownership of that? Well, responsibility for the building?
It's gotta be 13 years ago,
Yeah. So I mean,
14 years ago.
if you have if you had a 20-year shingle on there, you know.
Yeah, and the roof pitch is pretty good, so the shingles tend to last longer, but it's time, and they're the old 3-tab shingles, so.
All right. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $60,000 to purchase a replacement of a 2015 fire department vehicle or take any action relative thereto, proposed by the fire chief. Any questions on that? Actually, I have one. Go ahead, Justin Castello-Davis.
I saw the last meeting. I just want to clarify, is this a replacement or is this an actual new vehicle, Lincoln? Because it seemed like it wasn't a replacement.
The fire department, the fire chief has identified this as a replacement.
So this is not contingent on adding a position. There's not going to be like a flow down of a vehicle.
Yeah, no, not according to the request from the fire chief.
Sure.
Yes.
Do we know, is this is a vehicle that's currently in service? If I'm not mistaken. The 15 is one of the emergency vehicles. Just again, I just throw it out there, school department may take it from, it's available.
No.
What, do you
It
want
would-
this one? This
It
is
would be a good hand-me-down to the building department. The vehicle I have now is 150,000 miles, so.
Can we have yours then?
Make it a list. Put me on that list.
I'll put it in your driveway, Fred.
This might be a good hand-me-down for the DPW too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Let's have that discussion offline.
So I look back at the last time the fire department, well, I'm not sure about last year, but last year's annual report isn't up yet, but 2018, fire department got a utility vehicle. So I'm not sure what that one replaced. There are rumors. I don't know if anyone can quell this rumor, but there are rumors that there is a vehicle not being used and currently stored within the Armory building. Does anyone know anything about that rumor, or can confirm or refute it?
The-
No.
I don't know.
There are vehicles in the Armory building, but I believe they are all in use right now. So,
Some of them are the property of Plymouth County as well.
that is correct.
yeah.
So, however, if anyone wants to further get some specifics, I'm welcome to them, and I'm happy to look into it further if with some specifics.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, if you could just ask the fire chief whether or not he has a current vehicle not being that's purchased and but not being utilized, that would really the rumor came up during a finance committee meeting, and I had heard it offline.
I want to be clear. We used CARES Act monies to purchase an ambulance, and that ambulance, per federal guidance, through this December 31st, needs to be used on COVID-related calls.
Yeah.
So to the extent that someone may be thinking that is unused, it is being used, pursuant to federal regulations and federal guidance until it can be used otherwise.
Yeah.
So, so is it not fully used at this moment? Perhaps, but that is a function of the monies that we used to spend it, to buy it. And to the extent, and so after the federal guidelines drop off, we will be fully using it. I guarantee you that.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's how the subject came up. The subject
Is that the vehicle we're talking about?
No, the subject of the ambulance came up, and it was explained exactly how you explained it. It's a COVID vehicle, not able to be used for anything else until that time passes sometime in the future. And then the discussion of the rumor of other vehicle had come up.
Yeah, the ambulance that was purchased with the CARES Act funding is not stored in the Armory, though.
Right.
Sometimes it is, but at any rate,
Okay.
We're getting pretty deep into the weeds. But
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So last one is the fire department foam mitigation, to see if the town will raise and appropriate $10,000 to remove and replace the fire department's firefighting foam or take any action there too. I'm assuming that the current firefighting foam has PFAS in it, and or has some kind of chemical that is now determined that someone has determined that shouldn't be used. Does anyone know the answer to that? I'll ask that question of the fire chief.
I don't know the precise chemical, but I do know that the reason for this is because the chemicals are dangerous that we're using now and need to be replaced. I'm not sure. The question about the specific chemicals, we should ask the fire chief.
Yeah. Just, I mean, my knowledge on this is that past firefighting foam chemicals have used a chemical called, a string of chemicals called PFAS, PFAS acronym, and they call them the forever compounds, because they're finding them everywhere, and the forever part is it's going to stay there forever unless you try to mitigate it. But what technology has now discovered is that it is mitigatable. However, it's very costly. So, you'll see those, I'm sure, anywhere where there was training, ongoing consecutive training of this type of foam with that chemical, you're gonna have issues. And the issue is that it gets down to your in your soils, migrates to your groundwater, and contaminates people. And the crazy thing about it is that, for example, benzene is a chemical that is federally and state regulated. The anything over 1 part per billion is hazardous. You shouldn't drink it. The PFAS, you can't even call them regulations because they're not the standards just yet. but it's point, it's more than an order of magnitude greater than a part per billion. I don't even know what the standard is. It's like, say a part per, say one is your standard for part per benzene, it'll be 0.00001. So that's how minor of a portion of a chemical in water that you would need to make it hazardous and not drinkable. So there's a lot going on with that now. So, but unrelated to us. All right, so that's the question I have. So the only questions I have are associated with the pickup truck. We have an open questions in regards to the Whitman Hanson Regional School District phone system.
And I just got a text message that the assessment is going to be reduced by $5,500,000 next week. April Fools.
So
I was waiting all day for this, you know.
That was good.
That was good, yeah.
So that's the three questions we have. The open questions about the schools, the phone system, the firefighting foam, the pickup truck, the fire department utility truck, and the DPW pickup truck. So 4 questions. And Lincoln, you're gonna follow up with the fire department one. Oh, I'll do it. Oh,
He's on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. May I suggest, would you like to email the fire chief and put me on CC and we'll get an answer.
All right. So and then Josh McNeil, you're the point for the phone system, and I'll send out the 2 questions to DPW and the DPW.
You should get the phone report from Steve Burke, Dave.
Yeah.
I did send you over a PowerPoint presentation that was done earlier this year on the technology overview. If you could distribute that to the company, to the committee.
All right. Yeah. So what I'd like to do, in earlier part of the season, what I'd like to do is to try to keep emails, consolidated. Now that we're getting close to town meeting, I'm just going to go ahead and forward them once I receive them, forward along to the town to this committee for discussion at whatever the next meeting is. So we have weekly meetings up until town meeting is May what, Lincoln?
3rd.
At this moment, May 3rd.
May 3rd. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that gives us 4 meetings prior to that. So May 3rd. So the warrant closed. The final warrant is a week prior to that. So I'm trying to get my calendar going. May 3rd. So that's the 26th. So, and then, Lincoln, I know I've asked this in the past, but I'm not sure if you have an answer yet, but do you know what the date would be in order to have our recommendations published on the warrant?
I'm sorry, I'll get an answer on that.
Yeah. So the town meeting's on the 3rd, that's a Monday. So 1 week prior to that is the 26th. So I'm assuming it's going to be the week of April 18th through the 24th. So hopefully, yeah, definitely let us know, because maybe we could, well, we want to get these to the finance committee as well. So I forget who mentioned it, but April 15th looks like the date that we would want to have all these articles voted.
Yeah, I would suggest, just a friendly suggestion, I would suggest if there aren't further questions on particular items, I would suggest they be voted now. I think that would just help the process, but that's just my friendly suggestion.
Yeah, so like that brings me back to the question of prioritizing. Do we have I'd like to try to get a consensus of defining that. But is prioritizing just saying let's take all the capital articles and prioritize them? What does it mean? I'm struggling with it myself. What does it mean? Does it mean that we take all the capital articles and say, okay, this is what we think the priority is? Do we infuse what we think, what we know of the free cash, and then prioritize based on free cash? Or does prioritize mean something completely different? Or do we not prioritize? I don't know. I'm looking for some guidance here.
I would,
Go ahead, Justin.
I would think that, given the guidance that we have from the Collins Center, which assigns, not only a point system, for the viability of the project, but also how long the project's been outstanding, as well as, is there a funding source for it? Knowing what we have for free cash, knowing, for instance, okay, the generators. There's something that I believe should be prioritized because it completes a project and, allows us to move forward. Because right now, if we don't do that, you maybe get one of them done, but the other one's just all sitting there and God knows how much more it's going to cost you next time around. Get it done, bang, move on. It's in the rearview mirror. If there's an urgent and sudden need of something, or we know it could be an urgent and sudden need, we talk about, presenting some sort of a point system, therefore, also knowing what we have available for funds. If there's only so much money, we know that we can only put forward so many projects. And if we have enough, enough resources and we can fund all the projects that are on our plate, I don't see the reason to quote unquote prioritize. We would just recommend.
Yeah. So sorry, Frank. I'm hearing both sides. I'm hearing both arguments from you.
Well, what I'm saying is if we have enough money for everything,
right,
there's no sense in prioritizing because you can just recommend the articles.
Well,
but if you're going to have, if you're going to look at the financial constraints and you don't have enough funds available, then you do have to prioritize. I think, that's sort of the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hypothetically, you could have a curveball at town meeting where an amount gets approved for a greater than it was proposed for, a line item or an article, and then that then takes away from an appropriating source, and then so that scenario could happen. So even though you could go into town meeting thinking you have enough money to fund all these projects, but town meeting could throw you a curveball and say, no, you don't, because we're putting more money towards X. And now that pulls away from.
And you make a statement in town meeting saying that you recommended the project. And because we had enough available resources at the time, we didn't prioritize one over the other.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, that can happen no matter what. Even if you prioritize, you can have someone throw money at something. So, run into that trouble.
Justin Casanova-Davis?
Yeah, I would argue in favor of just prioritizing. And it's important because just like Fred was saying, that when Lincoln, the pot of money that we're maybe able to work with and utilize, maybe a little smaller. So just do the work in advance, prioritize and fit what you can with what you have available. I would just argue in favor of prioritizing personally.
Okay. So take the financial aspect out of it. So then if we take the financial aspect out of it, then there's two ways, either prioritize or not prioritize. So are you saying between those two options you would prioritize versus not prioritize?
Yeah, I always prioritize. Whenever I've done capital, I use a point system. I use a point system. You look at public safety, et cetera. Lincoln knows all this stuff, and the committee knows all this.
Yep.
But I prioritize and then just go down the list off there. So let's say theoretically we had $300,000, and you've got all these projects, and one project is $1.1 million. Even though it's the number one project, you say I can't do that. Maybe your next project's $50,000, $250,000, and then you do that. So.
Okay.
I would just like to, I 100% agree with you, and I'd just like to add one more caveat to this whole thing is the projects need to be vetted out prior and to have some engineering behind it or something substantial to document the dollars, you know? We can't have any of these, you know, projects that just are scope creep, that just endless things that just, you know, continually blow the budgets out of the water. You know, that would be my only thing is when the project is approved, it's got to be kind of vetted out properly. But I agree with the priority things, and if we don't have the funding, just like Justin just articulated, if we only have 300,000 in the piggy bank and a project comes in at $1 million, well, we got to figure out a different way to fund that, so that doesn't even come on the table today. You know, we'll just look at the other projects, and then we'll figure out funding later on.
Oh, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
If I could throw a curveball, and let's say that's a force main sewer, or it's a storage project, or it's a broken pipe, and there's no available resources out of water, or sewer, or et cetera. You know, then perhaps a decision has to be made by the committee. Are we asking for a capital or a debt exclusion? You know, at that point to be able to, you know, fund that.
Yeah, I think emergencies would be one-offs, and I think you have to address emergencies as they come.
You know,
But as far as budgeting,
I just suggest, so when we're talking about the capital plan before us, with the exception of the sewer force main and, you know, the possibility of having architectural plans for the DPW building, none of these we would want to ever borrow for, just to be clear, because the amounts are small enough. They're one-time purchases. We would not be wanting to incur debt on any of these items, except for the possibility of obviously the sewer force main, and certainly depending on the level of what the architectural drawings, if that's where that project goes with the DPW building.
What about a capital exclusion?
Debt. There isn't an instance where we'd have a capital exclusion, for example, for a $200,000 snowplow.
You know, like for instance, we funded an $800,000 technology package a few years ago.
Mhm.
Capital exclusion, one time, bang, done. You know,
For something that large, sure. Yep. Mr. Chairman, there's just the one clarification. Article P2. I realized the $10,244 fire department expense. That is the match for a grant that we received from Federal Emergency Management Agency for a generator at the fire station. So it's certainly technically capital. I'm pursuing, and I expect to be successful in getting some CARES Act money for that. So it's probably going to come off the warrant anyway. But just FYI, I misspoke. That would be a capital item. So.
Okay. So is it a removal replacement of the existing generator?
Correct.
Anybody need a generator? You know,
we'll take it.
You don't want that generator. You don't want that generator.
I was just going to jump back to prioritization. I do agree that part of this committee is that we prioritize projects, and we sourced in putting this committee together. We got people like Don, myself, Bob, and Josh for technical expertise, so that we could kind of analyze these projects. Josh is doing an outstanding job with the phone system, putting in the work there. But there are things that Articles 7 through 13 this year. Really, that's up to the DPW to prioritize their needs. So if we want to go down that road, we may want to bring Bruce or Dennis back in to kind of rank those for us.
Well, I could include it as part of my email and just, and see if they'll do it that way. I just don't like wasting people's time.
That's fine.
And let's try that. Let's try it in an email first. The response back I get, I'll disseminate, and if anyone feels that that's not sufficient, reply back, and then we'll request them to come in. Does that sound fair? Reasonable?
That
I
sounds
think
fair.
that's fair. I agree with Justin that the department should prioritize as well. because let's say I don't have enough backup information for this project, but going through 713, maybe I say, all right, we'll do the large dump truck, but the DPW commissioners think the 4-wheel drive 1-ton truck is the most important thing. I want to have that information from them. That's why they're the department head. That's why they're the commissioner. So I agree with Justin.
All right, let's do that. So then,
You want the same from the schools, or do we want to
Please.
make the decision for the
yeah,
schools?
so it'll go schools, fire department, DPW, and that's it. So it would just be those 3 departments. All right. I think I'm assuming it should be a doable thing for them to get to us prior to our next meeting. I'm assuming.
I'm sending the email right now to the school district, so.
All right, I'll try to do the same. All right, so I think with that, hopefully we'll get answers by next week, and then we'll let me put my calendar again. So that brings us to April 8th. We'll start taking our votes. Again, we're only voting on capital, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 items. That's if we get the answers, I'm assuming we'll be able to get through them all in one night, and then that will we have to get that information over to finance committee well in advance of town meeting. All right. Anyone see any issues with that? All right. So prioritize it. Okay. All right. So unless anyone feels that we need to take votes today, I'm open to that as well.
I think we can, as far as I'm concerned, we could wait until, we have priorities and, to move forward.
Okay. So just one last question on the priority. So say all the department heads respond back with their priority. How does that, where does that information then go? So, you know what I'm asking? Go ahead, Josh.
So let me just say this. I think, we need to obviously take respect in the fact that the department heads know what they need for their respective departments. And, as much as we want to take control and try to prioritize or reprioritize, I should say, unless there's a significant reasoning behind it and why the committee feels, differently, I think, we need to leave it in the basically the hands of the actual department heads to, do what they need to do as far as the, capital items are concerned on their side. I mean, if they're in agreement that, they want to do ACB instead of ABC, I think, we need to take that into consideration and obviously, work with them on, making it happen if funding is available, pending on the source.
So then we would disseminate that information to the finance committee and say, we voted this and the department heads prioritized their requests like that, and just provide them with that information.
Yeah, I mean, unless other, folks feel differently, I don't know, that us providing one, priority order and then, the department heads providing a second, I think that's going to confuse things a little bit, so.
Right. Yep. No, agreed. Yep. All right.
Well, that's why I want to get like the school's priority, and then we can sort of mesh it together. And, at the end of the day, it's what the town has for available resources, and you try and, I don't know, play Solomon, I guess, between one project to another.
Right. Okay. But right. But I think what I've heard tonight is that's not our position to peg one project over another. It's either the departments or town meetings. It's
Well, but if we're going to prioritize, we, in other words, so I just sent an email so we can have a facility subcommittee meeting, and we'll vote to prioritize what we've submitted for warrant articles. Now you get that. It may be the will of this committee that, the telephone system for, just picking something. Okay, that's the #1 priority for the district. But that DPW truck, that's gonna come before the district gets their driveway. Those are decisions and points and things that we have to assign on this committee. Otherwise, we're say, okay, the schools are most important, so we're gonna do the schools. Then we're gonna do this department and that department. And we haven't prioritized per se, anything. We've just done it by department.
Yeah, it's more specifically so, I think, from the district, let's say they submit 25 articles and, fire submits 5 and police submit 5 and so on and so forth. I think the role of the committee at that point is obviously to see what money is available. And then from that point, take it from there and say, okay, well, folks, let's just prioritize, the articles in your respective departments. When they bring that forward, then our team here takes that and says, you know what, I think we're going to be able to accomplish, this, and we'll start with, X, Y, and Z, and we scramble everything into the order that, we feel is going to work, and whether the schools are up the top and the fire's in the middle and the police is down bottom, or, vice versa. I think that's where the sort of the priority role on our point stands, in my honest opinion.
And I do know on the school standpoint, we've already prioritized and took off what we didn't feel was absolutely needed. We did that before wasting anybody's time.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to make, is that, personally myself, from the technology perspective, I'm not going to recommend something that we don't need. I mean, if it's on there, it's necessary. It's not something that we want, if you will. It's a necessary need at that point.
So I think I've heard you guys, but so here's a scenario. So we have essentially three departments with capital requests. They're all gonna prioritize their capital requests. So they're all gonna have a #1 request. So there's gonna be 3 #1 requests out there. So am I hearing that it should be the responsibility of this committee to choose, of the 3 #1s, who is the #1? Who's the GOAT?
I guess, again, looking back at the whole, I think questioning as to funding that's available. I mean, if we get down to the point where we don't have, money to cover all of the, current requests, I would have taken an assumption that we'd have to obviously, figure that out.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Carl.
Justin.
Thank you. You want to go? Go ahead.
No, I just want to suggest, so I don't intend to have this capital process in quite this way going forward, and we've talked about that some. So, so my intention would be, we have this October deadline for a capital, for a capital plan. My intention would be, in going forward in the future, this fall and going forward, to have that vetted, more fully vetted internally with the department heads and myself, to have a more fully internally vetted capital plan, taking that to the committee, and having this committee's charge sort of be focused on, do we need this item or not? We won't, and we won't fully know what our free cash position will be vis-a-vis, for example, the schools, until later. But as far as the needs, I think this committee, my intention, and I believe that we'll be able to accomplish this committee going forward will have that information earlier. And so we won't be doing it at this point. Wasn't possible this year with the timing, and I've been here a month and a half, right? But that's not what I foresee the capital system and the capital plan being going forward. That is to say, having this committee will have a capital plan much earlier. It will already have been vetted internally with myself and the department heads. And by all means, we can, this committee's charge and purpose is to more fully vet that. But I think a lot of these questions about prioritization might be answered in the improved capital process that we're going to be looking at going forward. So,
Okay.
I hope that's helpful for where I want to go going forward. Here we are today, and it is what it is. But for the future, I think these questions can be partially answered by having it earlier and having some of the internal conversations already happening, and then coming with a more finalized, not finalized, but a more fleshed out product that this committee sees, for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And
And early.
prior to you being with us, we discussed that, kind of how we want to adhere more to the October 1 deadline, and how that would then facilitate the changing of processes going
Mhm.
forward.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. So basically, you're saying that the because it's still in the new language of the proposed article to prioritize, but
Yep.
the definition of prioritize is likely going to change based on adhering to the article as written, or make it or
Yeah,
having.
I mean, I guess the definition of prioritizing can change as we go, but I think the conversation will be easier because I think there'll be more data earlier. And I think I'm not sure we as a committee will have to spend as much time thinking about what prioritization means, because I think we might just know. I guess that's my point. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can put an exclamation point on that. Justin, did you have anything else?
No, I think Lincoln hit it spot on.
All right.
Well, I think everybody here has been with a lot of capital expenditures budgets, and you got the OpEx and you got the CapEx, and the CapEx is always driven by what your piggy bank is, and so that's operating expenses are typically that's standard, but CapEx is what is the piggy bank? What do we have to spend? Then we prioritize from there. I think we're kind of doing it backwards here, and it's very difficult to do it backwards. You have to know what you have to spend. You can't spend what you don't have. So unless you have that, it's very difficult to put a CapEx out there. So I think that's the most difficult thing that we've never had in this committee, of what do we have to spend. Once we know what we have to spend, then we can make recommendations. After the department heads give us their priority list, then we can say, okay, this is what we have for the entire community. This is what we can spend. I think that's our role.
And part of that will be just because of the function of the budgeting cycle, and no offense whatsoever to the schools, but because of the schools budgeting, some of that will be unanswerable. But we're going to do all we can to get answers earlier, to get to the extent that what we have to spend. Some of it will still be unanswerable because of factors outside of our town of Whitman's control, right? But at least we will be able to get answers earlier on the things that are within our control. And I give a ton, all the credit in the world to Fred, because he's been, I think, probably the biggest voice towards working on school budgeting earlier. And that's a key component in all of this, in having a clearer answer earlier of what we have to spend. And I give him all the credit in the world for being an advocate for that, and for a long time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else on prioritization? All right. So so just to make it clear, we're all in favor of votes next week. Hopefully all votes next week, and then we can, essentially once our votes are in, our role is complete for the budget season. However, based on the DPW building issue, we may decide to meet sometime prior to, I'll leave this for another discussion. We may need to vote. We need to meet a few times next year, earlier than anticipated. All right. So on that note, I'll enter a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second, Justin Evans. Roll call vote. Dave Cordero, yes. Fred Small,
Yes.
Don Essen,
Yes.
Justin Casanova Davis,
Yes.
Justin Evans,
Yes.
Josh McNeil,
Yes.
Lincoln Heineman,
Yes.
Bob Curran? Yes.
He said yes, I can read lips.
Yes.
All right, meeting adjourned at 7:52. All
Good
right,
night.
thanks,
Good
everyone.
night.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night, guys.